Hello, in this video you'll learn how to customize MudBlazor templates, the templates themselves in a sort of very generic theme kind of a way, and then also you'll be able to enhance them even more by customizing classes for certain objects or overriding the styles completely directly for each element. Now, it is to some extent straightforward, but there are some difficult bits and pieces we will try to cover as much as possible, where you can get stuck when overwriting and what would be the best practices perhaps to get started in terms of themes. So without going any further, this example is taken from previous videos in these series. If you want to learn about setups and tables, and then if you want to learn about forms, watch the previous videos. But in this case, we'll take the previous sample, which is just pure MudBlazor, nothing's modified, nothing's customized, and we'll try to improve it a bit. So we'll try to change the primary and secondary colors so it's not purple like this, and perhaps a few other colors for different fonts as well. Now, we have this piece of code. Let's get started with setting up just a general theme, the colors, the primary colors, some fonts, some weights, and all those things. Now, the theme itself will usually be applied in main layout in the Mud theme provider, but there are two options where you can actually establish it. You can do it in the main layout.razor, where we have it, where you'll apply it. However, customizing a theme can become quite a large code base, especially if you get into typography. You want to customize different headers for the whole theme. It will be kind of a large thing, so a better thing would be to simply create a new class file like this. We have custom MB theme, it's called, and then we will apply it later. But just to get started, what we need is a bit of inheritance here. Let's see, mud theme would be mud theme, like that. We should have a using statement in a minute, like that, using MudBlazor mud theme. So now this is your mud theme, and you can customize this as much or as little as you want. You don't have to override everything. You can just override those bits and pieces that you need, but usually the way it would work, you would have probably some design from Figma. Perhaps you have some brand guidelines and you want to add just those sort of main colors on the buttons, on the backgrounds and things of that nature. So what you do is you simply use the constructor here, and in there you can set up all your customizations. Of course, the first thing we need to go to is probably the palette. We can take the suggestion, we'll need the typography later. Let's get rid of it for now. We'll need it later, but let's start with the palette. Now, the palette, this one won't work. It's an abstract class for every palette. And there are two kinds of palettes, basically. You have your light mode and your normal mode, you should probably say, and your dark mode. Usually, you'll probably go with light mode. You won't mess with it. If you want, you can do a toggle for it. Although it is something to be careful with. You can, of course, toggle the themes themselves, but again, there's lots of styles being applied, so if you do want to go with different themes and toggle them, or if you want to do light and dark modes, which you can certainly do, it's already for it. Still remember, even though MudBlazor has been tested and used and it's well supported and all that, it may take some testing and some adjustments to your whole code, to your whole look from time to time, if you are going with those different light and dark things. It does work, it should work, but just remember, some things just won't look the same, and you'll have to work on that, so consider if it's worth the time. But to set the normal palette, we use palette light, and the palette light will have some default values. Now, from the suggestion, I do believe it should be all good now. We should have some new colors. Whether it will match or not, it's a different story, but by applying this, we will be able to have completely different colors from the original theme, essentially. And then one thing to note, palette light will go into palette light in this case, and palette dark would also go into palette dark at that point. But let's stick to the palette light. And at this point, we kind of have what we need here. We have the setup for some customization to the colors. So now let's get back to the main layout and let's override the Mud theme provider. See if we have it, Mud theme provider, like this. And then we simply use our new custom theme. Now, you can sort of try and do it like this, but you will probably need to just create it like that, much easier and much better. Let's do a little private mod custom theme, that's not what we want at all. Let's see, we already have a class, we don't need another class. And as I mentioned in previous videos, some of these suggestions, they can be quite useful, and sometimes they can be a bit annoying. Now we will have our custom theme, and then we can apply it here. And we of course need to close the tag with a mod theme provider like this. So now everything is applied. We should have some different colors. If they're not different, we'll take a look at where you can sort of check and reference where they are. And let's take a look at the actual code, how it looks launched, the same dashboard if we see any changes. So once we launch the code, if we go to this form example, again, previous video, if you want to learn about validations in MudBlazor and perhaps a bit more about in Blazor itself, but for that, it would be better to watch the suggested course alongside this video to learn about Blazor and forms validations and security and all those things. But in any case, now we have this top bar as a sort of grayish color. So it'd be the primary color, most likely. We can check and look and see. And then we have the register button, as you can see, green, not the usual Blazor purple. Now, we can check the button in one way. The nav bar is sort of perhaps more tricky. We don't necessarily assign a color, so it might be a bit more tricky to find it. But if we go and inspect the element, the way you can find some of these colors, and again, once you get deeper into certain elements, into certain components of MudBlazor, it won't be so obvious where the color comes from and what kind of color it is, but essentially these are CSS variables, so these are not predefined. And if you go into all of these objects, you'll kind of be able to see which color and which palette they are using. Now this one is being overridden some reason by something, right? If we go into this toolbar, we can go and see the body is just default color, so it's not coming from MudBlazor most likely. But anything that would be a color somewhere else, also as you see typography, which is the next step, will be coming from these MudBlazor palettes. And you can see from the root, they're all placed in the root when you use MudBlazor, so kind of easy to see, but black is black, white is white, sort of white or sort of black. But now the primary color is this green one, which we set in the Mud theme provider. And there are darken and lighten ones, but those are used just for specific components in a kind of different shade, which MudBlazor will take care of that for you. And you can go through and see exactly what those different colors would be on primary or secondary, as long as it is in the page. So it's one of those ways to actually find them if you don't specify them in the code. Now, if you do specify them in the code, it's of course a lot easier. Let's get back to the code and see. If it's specified like on this button, it's a primary color, so know that green color is the primary color. Now, you can select color on most components, on most MudBlazor components. This will be available, so you can do secondary or all these other different colors, dark, transparent, and all those things. Of course, transparent should stay transparent usually, but we can do error button, and again, it's based on your theme. So for example, if we get back quickly to the theme, right here we have the text secondary and text primary, which we can't exactly perhaps modify on the button, but what we can use is, for example, secondary color. So if we do go in here back to the form and use a secondary color, And if we get back to the code, you will see that the button is this orange color now. So these are the sort of basic things that you can do to a button. You can do to all the other elements that accept the color scheme, and you can change some of the other colors as well in the template, just so we don't overcomplicate things. I didn't do that, but you can certainly do that. So now we have the text, well, not the text, the colors rather, taken care of. And we should probably get to the text, like for example this little register. It doesn't look too good, perhaps it should be H1, but what do we want H1 to be? Do we want the way to be 100 or 500? Do we want it bold or italic and all those things? So you can change quite a few things, although as you will see soon, there are some limitations. But let's try and change a bit of a typography for this. For the typography, let's improve upon this example a little bit. We have mud text as the body one, because the previous example we didn't touch the styles too much. We kind of talked about the variants and how you arrange all the grids and things of that nature. But now, since we are overriding things, let's do this as, say, H1, and this, let's do something more like H4. Okay, so, and call it your new... Well, okay, there's a suggestion there. Can we take it? No. Your new account. That's gonna be good enough. Now, let's launch it quickly. So here we have this sort of weird size and something somewhat interesting. We still have the original one as well laying around. We will remove that, but we have this sort of interesting size. I would say it's a bit too big. Perhaps it's not. But let's say it is a bit too big and we want that H1 to be a slightly smaller, slightly more tasteful throughout the application, right? So we're not just adjusting this one, we're adjusting the whole thing throughout the application. Let's get back into the code. We have it here, we have it there, and we have H3 laying around there. Just a simple H3, which we don't need at all. But this is the H1 for register, and if you wanted to go in and change it manually, just for this one page, without any additional classes, which you could do the classes, but one thing to remember, whenever you overwrite anything like colors, fonts on MudBlazor, you will use style. We do have the style component here. However, let's say we want to do color green or something, green, yellow, why not? What you need to do first is you need to do important. So anything you try to override should be important. Now, some things may work without that, but usually you will need to use important. Something, again, important to remember. And if you're applying a class, same thing, you need to add important there because you are overriding, and the primary statement will be somewhere above yours, so you have to override it with important. And again, that's why it kind of gets a bit tricky. And also remember, some components have all kinds of things. They might have spans and bits and pieces of text and buttons in that one select component. For example, here we have select. So we can probably try and override the color, but there will be other elements inside it, so it gets a bit more tricky to actually do it. But in general, if you want to mess around with typography, you just go into typography, if we can find it. Yeah, right here we can find it. All good, and new typography, and that's all we need. Now, again, you can change as many or as few elements as you want. You can do different defaults, you can do different things, but let's just do it like that. Let's keep it simple. New H1, the suggestion doesn't work, although it's quite close, sort of quite close. H1 typography, H1. This is kind of an interesting thing. Let's delete all this. It's a bit too noisy, and let's get rid of this. So we have a font size. Let's make something more readable. So let's do 16 PT or PX. Let's just do just so we are sure it works. And as you can see, it is a bit of a thing where everything is a string, so you won't exactly get too much of a suggestion here. And also, if we go just a bit deeper, just to kind of take a look at what we can use, you will see we have font weight as well, we have text transform, but really, we don't exactly have too much of a way to mess with colors and things of that nature. Now, color you can apply, but it will be one of those predefined colors. And as you can see, this is again a string. So for some reason, it's giving me a suggestion, not a string, but let's make it bold. Let's make it big and bold. I think 800 should be. So now you'll see the H1 will be completely different. Before we go any further, let's try and launch it and let's see the difference. Now it became kind of small, but you can see it also became green because we made it green. We overrode that color and made it green. Although perhaps in this case, we must admit it's a bit too small, but never mind that. Let's get back into the code and let's, just for the sake of it, let's make it 24 or 26, whatever. Doesn't matter really, but the point is that everything is set in either pixels or REM. You can use whatever measurements, as you can see right here from this example, just like you would use in style. The only problem, of course, is you have to know what you're using because there's no suggestion. So if you fail, it's gonna probably not work very well. You will have just a very weird error, depending on what you add wrong. But and also, again, something to remember, if you want to override colors for specific, perhaps, pages, you'll have to do it either directly or by applying a class. So just create a new class and apply it to CSS class specifically. Unfortunately, we can't exactly override too much of a typography. However, if we get back to this register form, we can get rid of the style and we can see we can do color. So just like the buttons, you can actually do these mud texts. Typo 1, H1, H4, doesn't matter, body, there's plenty of those to choose from. Of course, this should be, unless it's some inside app after registration, but always remember, you're not just using different sizes or different typographies for the beauty, you're also using it for SEO, so something not to forget. Even though we're using MudBlazor, essentially this will end up being H1 and this will end up being H4, and it will reflect how your results look on the search engine, so something not to forget, even though, again, we're using MudBlazor, but it will translate in an actual HTML component if your site is sort of publicly exposed to search engines. If not, then you don't really care, but you might care as well because you might have some special crawlers and things of that nature. So it's always better to follow, at least to some extent, those good SEO practices. But other than that, again, we can apply all kinds of colors, and we can do, say, third color like this, and we can go to suggestions. So now at this point, it will be a bit different. Now, the most probably difficult part is if you want to override specific classes. So all of these components, they do have some kind of a MudBlazor class. You can assign your own and use important and override it like that. You can try and override the Blazor class itself. Let's go into a bit of CSS and let's see how that works, or if it doesn't actually work, because that's kind of a problem sometimes, or more likely a lot of times. There's a class, depending on one class, and you need to override them so deeply, it's very difficult to do it. So it's always worth considering. Do you want to still keep that functionality of that element? If it's a checkbox, do you really need that MudBlazor one if it's going to be completely customized and you actually need that customization? It's always important to consider, but let's take a look at a bit of that. Now, when overriding, you might think if we take exactly the class and subclass of the button that we're trying to modify and just copy it and use important, it may work. Now, in some cases you need to go deep, in some cases you need to go root. It becomes a very sort of advanced and complicated CSS arrangement. So it is certainly not a recommendation, and we're not even going to try to attempt that. But if you want to override, it's better to create your own class. So let's say custom for this page, right? We just have a code behind the form, and then you can do whatever you want. Of course, just like the style, as I mentioned previously, you need to do that important because you are overriding. And with some components, it won't exactly work because if you need to modify a certain div in some select element, or especially in something more complex like a calendar, it will be extremely difficult to modify. And at that point, you might consider just sticking to those default colors, default typography, or just creating your own. Again, it might be even quicker than trying to customize this whole arrangement because it is quite complex. We are using variables, we're using a bunch of classes, we do have our own structure to this thing, so it's not so easy to override. But we can certainly try and do this in this sort of simple scenario for a button. We can go here and just do class like this, and that should give us some result. And now you can see that this becomes a dark black color. Now, sometimes you have to go deep with CSS, so use a deep prefix on the class. Sometimes it won't catch at all. So again, it's always important to determine when you actually have to override that deeply. And sometimes if code behind CSS doesn't work, simply move your classes to any general CSS, app.css or whatever. You have styles.css that may help you a bit. And you can try and override classes directly, but again, it can become very cumbersome and it's not really recommended. Now, this example will be available on Patreon, as well as the ones from the previous videos on this topic. Also check out some stuff on the new .NET 10 minimal API stuff. Interesting topic, interesting to consider sometimes in Blazor server applications, very useful when you only need to expose a single route to some little thing. And there are some courses available, free courses for certain subscription tiers on Patreon, so do check that out. And with that said, we will conclude this video.